Hello and welcome to LiCAS.news Weekly Wrap. I'm Shirly Benedictos and these are headlines for this week. Cardinal Bo calls for calm, release of prisoners, and urges West to avoid sanctions. Christians in India targeted under new anti-conversion laws. Hong Kong unveils national security guidelines for children aged 6 and above. Indonesia drops mandatory rule on religious attire for state schools. Philippine church groups appeal to Supreme Court to junk anti-terrorism law. U.S. deeply disturbed by reports of systematic rape of Muslims in China camps. Pope Francis calls for mutual respect to achieve world peace. And now for our stories. Cardinal Bo, the Archbishop of Yangon, has issued a powerful, passionate message to the people of Myanmar, the military that has seized power, the imprisoned civilian leadership, and the international community. He appealed to 55 million people of the majority Buddhist country to remain calm and not resort to violence in the wake of a military coup. He pleaded with the international community not to impose sanctions, but seek a solution through dialogue. In a statement, he said he was not speaking as a politician, but a spiritual leader with a desire to console the people. He said he has watched with sadness the moments of darkness in the country's history and watched with hope the resilience of the people in their struggle for dignity. Alleging fraud in the election, the military said the government had ignored its protests, so it seized control early Monday morning on February 1. A rights group has called for the repeal of the new anti-conversion legislation in an Indian state which, they say, has already been used to target Christians. Christian Solidarity Worldwide said in a media release that the newly promulgated Freedom of Religion Ordinance 2020 in the state of Madhya Pradesh expands the scope of criminalizing conversion. The group said that there are concerns that, like similar laws in other Indian states, it will be used to target religious minorities with false accusations of forced conversion and miscast conversion as an act perpetrated on a person by another rather than an act of free will. In recent months, similar ordinances have been introduced in other states dominated by the Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, such as Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and Karnataka. CSW's President Mervyn Thomas said the so-called freedom of religion laws are in fact curbing people's freedom to choose their religion or belief. Hong Kong has unveiled controversial guidelines for schools in the Chinese-ruled city that include teaching students as young as 6 about colluding with foreign forces and subversion as part of a new national security curriculum. Beijing imposed the security law on Hong Kong in June 2020 in response to months of often violent anti-government and anti-China protests in 2019 that put the global financial hub more firmly on an authoritarian path. The Education Bureau's guidelines, released late on February 4, show that Beijing's plans for semi-autonomous Hong Kong go beyond quashing dissent and aim for a societal overhaul to bring its most restive city more in line with the Communist Party-ruled mainland. After the 2019 protests, in which many of the demonstrators were teenagers, Chinese leaders turned to re-education in a bid to tame the city's youth and make them citizens loyal to China. Activists in Indonesia lauded the government's decision to ban public schools from making religious attire mandatory, a move that followed national outrage over non-Muslim students being forced to wear a hijab. Indonesia officially recognizes 6 religions, with nearly 90% of the population are Muslim, but concern has grown in recent years that more conservative interpretations of Islam are fueling religious intolerance. The government signing of the decree on February 3 on religious attire in school dress codes came a few weeks after news emerged about a school in West Sumatra province forcing non-Muslim female students to wear a hijab. The issue captured national attention because of a protest by the parents of one of the girls, news of which spread on social media. Several church groups in the Philippines have appealed to the Supreme Court this week to exercise sound judgment and junk the country's anti-terrorism law. The church leaders said they believe that the country's Anti-Terrorism Act is a repressive law fashioned around an ambiguous definition of terrorism. The group that calls themselves One Faith, One Nation, One Voice warned that the anti-terrorism law will only be misused and abused by militarists who wish to lord it over the people. The Supreme Court started to hear oral arguments on the anti-terrorism law on February 2 amid protest by human rights and activist groups. The church leaders said they are praying that sound judgment founded on our nation's values and constitutional protections of democracy, civil liberties, and the respect for human life and rights will guide the court. The United States is deeply disturbed by reports of systematic rape and sexual abuse against women in internment camps for ethnic Uyghurs and other Muslims in China's Xinjiang region. A BBC report earlier on February 3 said women in the camps were subject to rape, sexual abuse, and torture. The British broadcaster said several former detainees and a guard have told the BBC they experienced or saw evidence of an organized system of mass rape, sexual abuse, and torture. The administration of former U.S. President Donald Trump imposed sanctions on Chinese officials and firms it linked to abuses in Xinjiang. New President Joe Biden, which took office on January 20, made clear its plans to continue a tough approach to Beijing on this and other issues. Pope Francis this week called on the global community to practice mutual respect, saying that people can either choose to be brothers and sisters or lose everything. In a message for the observance of the First International Day of Human Fraternity on February 4, the Pope said, "There is no time for indifference." He said, "Fraternity means an outstretched hand. Fraternity means respect. Fraternity means listening with an open heart. Fraternity means firmness in one's own convictions because there is no true fraternity if one's convictions are negotiated," he added. The Pope said, "We cannot wash our hands of the present situation with distance, disregard, and contempt." And that's all for this week. I'm Shirly Benedictos for LiCAS.news, your independent Catholic news source in Asia. For more stories, visit our website and subscribe to our YouTube channel.